Life is a fight for territory. And once you stop fighting for what you want, what you don't want will automatically take over. Les Brown. Hello, students of O'Connor. My name is Alyssa McGill, and we are gathered here today to commemorate the Aboriginal peoples of Canada. I am going to tell you about something called the Oka Crisis. Never heard of it? Neither did I until about a month ago. The terror that took place from July 11th to September 26th, 1990 still continues to haunt the Kanesatake Mohawks of Oka, Quebec to this day. The land that was once promised to the Mohawks after this pursuit was never given. So the least we can do as Canadians is show our appreciation by talking about it and giving our condolences to those who were caught up in the brutal gunfire and to those who continue to suffer. The Oka Crisis was something that proves that the government needs are more important than the Indigenous peoples and that their land is disrespected. It proves that the Canadian government and police force do not use proper conduct when addressing situations with the Indigenous people. And lastly, it has caused many changes, short and long term, for the Kanesatake Mohawks all around the world and the government. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will start you off with a little bit of history. In 1961, a golf course was built on Mohawk territory, despite the Mohawks fighting to keep their land that they owned and had the rights to. In 1989, the government proposed the idea to expand the course, which would, in return, move it onto sacred Mohawk burial grounds. How would you feel if your loved one's gravestone was removed and a course that people use on their free time was placed over the resting bodies of your partner, lover, mother, grandfather, and other people's families? The amount of disrespect and lack of compassion for the sacred ground was unbearable. They did not care about the souls who were resting underneath the soil and didn't feel for the families who would not just lose more territory, but also lose the sight of their family members who were on the other side. Graveyards are places that are supposed to be respected. They are gateways for those who are still breathing to communicate with those who have passed. To take someone's resting ground and turn it into a recreational sporting turf is way out of line, but they did not show any sort of remorse. They cared more about the needs of the white citizens than the needs of those who founded this country. As if they hadn't taken enough, they also wanted condos to be built due to overpopulation of those who surrounded the reserve. Indigenous people of Canada lost an entire country, and the government continues to take things away from them to satisfy their needs and do not show any care for the needs of those who have been here for over 12,000 years, which is scientifically proven through bones and artifacts. Steve Bonspale, an Indigenous citizen who witnessed this standoff, said the so-called Oka Crisis brought to the forefront the day-to-day struggles to affirm Native rights that are supposedly guaranteed, protected by Ottawa, but ones that are flouted and disregarded so easily by a government that still does not acknowledge it is planted firmly on Native land. Despite all of the proof that this land does not belong to us, the government still treats Indigenous people like refugees, and their wishes are most likely never granted because they continue to be neglected to this day. Now, I want all of you to close your eyes and imagine being a mother or father of two young children, taking part in a peaceful protest to save your land, just for it to turn to a shootout filled with tear gas, concussion grenades, and guns, which could kill or hurt your little babies. Imagine being a warrior, fighting to keep your grandmother's headstone up, just to get hit with tear gas or skimmed by a bullet. I want you to keep in mind that this was all over the expansion of a golf course. A golf course. A barricade was built to keep the police from snatching the Mohawks and building it against their will, just like they did in the first place. And it ended up in gunfire? No wonder Corporal Marcel Lemay was shot and killed. The only way to properly defend yourself from a gun or a grenade is with a gun. The indigenous people could not just sit back and be killed over a recreational sport. They had to fight back and defend themselves and their families, and the only way to do that was to shoot back. Imagine being a child, seeing the flash of bullets, the cloud of tear gas, and the distress in your family's eyes, just so you can keep your homeland. This is not something a young child should witness, and it stays with them for their whole lives. The police and the government did not care whether the children were looking or not. They just cared about themselves and the needs of other citizens. When someone was wounded, instead of getting immediate medical care, they were shoved in a crowded school bus and taken into custody. A gun is an evil, people-killing machine that is only meant to do harm. When people are being shot over a sport, there is something deeper and more serious going on. The hate, harm, hurt, and hell that those people went through for 2 months was all because the government did not give up when they should have, and approached it with the wrong people. If negotiations can be made peacefully, they should be. When you get a whole police and military team to show up with guns and grenades, obviously the Mohawks got their guard up, and it was never going to turn out as peaceful as the indigenous people wanted. The Kanesatake Mohawks tried to stay calm and do it with peace and protection. But the police fired first. The last thing that needs to be addressed is what became a factor, short-term and long-term, good and bad, after this event took place. Firstly, bonds were destroyed. The Mohawks and Indigenous people of Canada have tried to make bonds with the government and have ultimately let them take advantage for far too long. You can all agree that everybody has a breaking point, and they needed to defend themselves. Would you like it if someone constantly came into your home and took your things without you fighting back? Yeah, me neither. The government would ultimately benefit from a strong bond with the indigenous people, and it's their loss and their fault that they don't have one, because they took advantage of them. The Kanesatake Mohawks know and are constantly in fear that this will happen again. So they never fully trust the government, because they have repeatedly been hurt by them. The Kanesatake Grand Chief, Serge Simon, has lived through one and is well aware of the reoccurrence, and said, "I hope and pray it doesn't. I cherish peace above all. I don't want to advocate another Oka Crisis." Another effect would of course be the horror that they endured that day, and that they endured day by day. It takes a lot of strength to overcome seeing gunfights, screaming, yelling, and fighting between your family and your country for what you love. Many indigenous people suffer from mental illness, but they suffer in silence because they are not offered the same help and care that we are. Why? Because of their culture. This event wasn't something joyful to remember, but it happened. And because of it, the government lacks a bond with the indigenous, which hurts them in the long run. And the indigenous suffer every day due to constantly having to fight for what they rightfully own. To conclude, the Kanesatake Mohawks endured a huge mess over something that they owned in the first place. They were denied their needs, and their land was not respected as it should have been, and should be. They were not approached in an appropriate manner, and lastly, the effects still hurt them today. There are people fighting all over Canada for what they want. White females and white males are not neglected, and we all need to start fighting for what really matters. We need to stand with the Indigenous peoples of Canada because sadly, they are making little progress on our own. The 21st century problems that privileged people are complaining about are nothing compared to what the Indigenous people go through on a daily basis. We need to stand with the real owners of our beautiful country and help them get out of the third world that they live in. We say we are all equal, but O'Connor, when are we going to start showing it? Thank you for your time.